Listen up, young people. I'm 75 years old, and life has taught me every kind of lesson. I've seen certainty, I've lived doubt, I've felt joy, and I've felt pain. The most important thing I've learned is this: life isn't just about studying or earning wealth, or expecting the world to always be fair. The real purpose is to become a human being. Compassionate, humble, loving, and someone who helps others. Remember this: time is short, but your actions can be great. Light up the world with your own heart, instead of being lost in your own worries. My name is Daniel, and I am 75 years old. For most of my life I believed certainty was strength. I believed faith meant knowing, without hesitation, exactly where you stood, exactly what was true, and exactly who was right. That belief was handed to me early, before I had language for doubt or courage to question anything placed in front of me. I grew up in a house where religion was not discussed, it was practiced. Sunday mornings were sacred and non-negotiable. We dressed quietly, drove to church quietly, and sat in the same wooden pews week after week. My father held a leadership role. My mother taught children the scriptures, and I memorized verses before I fully understood the words inside them. Everything felt ordered, clean, certain. As a child, certainty felt comforting. It wrapped around me like a rule book for life. Right and wrong were clearly marked. Good people were rewarded. Bad people faced consequences. God watched. God cared. God had a plan. And if questions ever formed in my mind, they stayed there unspoken, because doubt was treated like disobedience rather than curiosity. No one warned me that life would eventually test every answer I had memorized. That test arrived when I was 23 years old. My closest friend died in a car accident on a rainy evening that should have ended like any other. He was kind in a way that didn't require attention. He volunteered without posting about it. He listened more than he spoke. If anyone deserved a long, peaceful life, it was him. And yet, in a single moment, he was gone. At his funeral, I stood among familiar faces and familiar phrases. People spoke gently about divine plans and eternal rest. Their voices were calm, practiced, almost rehearsed. I wanted to believe them. I truly did. But something inside me resisted. Not quietly either. It rose like heat behind my eyes. I wasn't sad. I was angry. Angry that goodness had not protected him. Angry that prayers had not mattered. Angry that the answers I was given no longer fit the shape of reality standing in front of me. That anger did something unexpected. It didn't push me away from faith immediately. Instead, it cracked it open. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask questions without already knowing the approved response. Questions that didn't end with comfort. Questions that felt dangerous. Why do good people suffer? Why does belief not guarantee protection? And what happens when certainty collapses? I didn't announce these questions. I carried them quietly, like a fracture you pretend doesn't hurt. Outwardly, I continued my life as expected. Inwardly, something had shifted. Faith was no longer a solid structure. It had become something fragile, something unfinished. Looking back now, I understand that moment as the beginning, not the failure of my journey. The moment certainty broke was the moment honesty entered. I didn't know it then, but losing answers was the first step toward learning how to live without pretending I had them. At 23, I still believed truth had to exist somewhere, whole and complete. I just no longer believed it had been handed to me fully formed. And that realization, as painful as it was, opened a door I would spend the rest of my life walking through. After my friend's death, I didn't abandon faith. That would have been easier. Instead, I lived in an uncomfortable middle space, still attending church, still bowing my head in prayer, but no longer feeling anchored. The words sounded familiar, yet hollow. I was repeating language that no longer explained the world I was experiencing. So I began searching quietly. At first, I told myself I was simply studying, trying to strengthen my belief. I reread scripture with fresh eyes, hoping clarity would return if I looked hard enough. But clarity didn't come. What came instead was curiosity, and curiosity, once allowed, is difficult to contain. I started reading beyond what I was raised to read: philosophers, historians, writers who questioned everything. I read the Quran slowly and respectfully, surprised by how much emphasis it placed on mercy, discipline, and humility. I read Buddhist teachings that spoke less about God and more about suffering, awareness, and compassion. I explored Hindu philosophy that described reality as layered and vast, far beyond simple definitions. What unsettled me most was not the differences. It was the similarities. Everywhere I looked, people were wrestling with the same fears, the same hopes, the same longing to understand why we are here and how we should live. Different symbols, different rituals, but the same human questions echoing beneath them all. During this period, I met someone who would change the way I understood belief. We worked together at the same company, though our paths rarely crossed beyond polite greetings. He was a devout Muslim, open about his faith without ever pushing it on anyone. At first, I kept my distance, not out of hostility, but out of inherited assumptions I hadn't yet challenged. One evening, we were assigned to finish a project that stretched late into the night. The office emptied, the noise faded, and conversation replaced productivity. We talked about work, then family, then life. Eventually, faith entered the conversation naturally, without tension. He spoke about prayer as discipline, not escape, about charity as responsibility, not performance, about submission not as weakness, but as the relief of admitting you are not the center of the universe. He described waking before dawn to pray as grounding, a reminder that life required intention. As he spoke, something unexpected happened. I recognized myself in his words, not his theology, not his rituals, but his longing. It was the same feeling I had carried since childhood, the same pull toward meaning, the same desire to be aligned with something greater than my own ego. Sitting there in that quiet office, I realized how wrong I had been to assume difference meant distance. That night forced me to confront a difficult truth. My faith had taught me to label, not to listen, to protect answers rather than understand people. And yet, understanding was exactly what my soul had been craving. I didn't convert. I didn't replace one belief system with another. Instead, something more subtle happened. My certainty loosened further, but my respect deepened. I began to see belief not as a single destination, but as a landscape wide and complex, shaped by culture, history, and personal pain. This realization frightened me at first. Without firm boundaries, everything felt unstable. But over time, I noticed something surprising. The more I listened, the less threatened I felt. The more I learned, the less I needed to be right. I was no longer searching for the perfect answer. I was learning how to ask better questions. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, my understanding of faith began shifting from certainty to sincerity. By the time I reached 50, the questions I had carried for decades were no longer quiet companions. They had grown heavier, louder, and more demanding. Life had not unfolded the way I once imagined it would. Marriage, which I assumed would naturally stabilize with time, felt strained and fragile. Financial pressure followed me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. And slowly, without admitting it to myself, I began numbing the unease with alcohol. From the outside, I looked functional. I showed up to work. I smiled when expected. I fulfilled responsibilities. But internally, I was exhausted from holding myself together. Faith, once my anchor, felt distant. Not gone, but muted. I didn't feel abandoned by God, so much as unsure whether I knew how to reach him anymore. The irony was painful. After years of searching across beliefs and traditions, I still felt alone. One night, After an argument that ended in silence rather than resolution, I found myself sitting in my garage well past midnight. The house was quiet. The weight of everything I hadn't said pressed down on me. I didn't plan to pray. I didn't even know if I believed in prayer anymore. But something inside me gave up trying to be composed. I spoke out loud, awkwardly, without structure or rehearsed language. "I don't know what I believe," I said. "I don't know if you're listening, but I can't keep doing this alone." There was no sudden clarity, no warmth, no sign that anything had changed. I felt slightly foolish, like someone talking into an empty room. Eventually, I stood up, turned off the light, and went inside carrying the same confusion I had started with. Nothing miraculous happened that night. The following morning, however, something ordinary did. A neighbor I barely knew knocked on my door. We had exchanged polite greetings over the years, nothing more. He asked if I wanted to get coffee. Normally, I would have declined. That morning I didn't. We sat at a small table for hours. He spoke about his own struggles, his drinking, his marriage nearly falling apart. He told me about support groups, counselors, community resources I hadn't known existed. He didn't preach. He didn't fix anything. He simply listened and shared. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. As I drove home later that day, a question surfaced that I couldn't answer. Was that help divine intervention? Coincidence or simple human kindness? I turned it over in my mind, searching for a conclusion. Eventually, I realized something surprising. The answer didn't matter as much as the outcome. Help had arrived. That realization changed the way I thought about belief. I had spent so much energy trying to define the source of meaning that I missed how meaning often arrives through people, through timing, through connection, through vulnerability. Over the next year, I sought help intentionally. I reduced my drinking. I learned how to speak honestly without defensiveness. My marriage didn't magically repair itself, but it softened. We stopped pretending everything was fine and started acknowledging what wasn't. Faith, for me, became quieter during that season, less declarative, less certain, but it also became more grounded. I stopped asking faith to explain everything and started allowing it to accompany me instead. I learned that belief doesn't always rescue you from the storm. Sometimes it simply teaches you how to ask for help while standing in the rain. And for the first time, that felt like enough. By the time my wife became ill, I had learned to live with uncertainty. But nothing prepares you for watching someone you love fade. We had been married 52 years, long enough to share habits, silences, and jokes that needed no explanation. Hospice moved into our lives quietly, rearranging rooms, schedules and expectations. Days blurred together as I learned a new language of care, patience and goodbye. In those final weeks, belief returned to me in an unexpected form, not as answers, not as promises, but as presence. Sitting beside her bed, I stopped trying to solve the mystery of existence and focused on what was real in front of me, holding her hand, listening to her breathe, being there. One evening, as the light softened through the window, she asked a question that carried the weight of our entire life together. She said, "Do you think we'll see each other again?" I searched myself for certainty and found none. So I told her the truth. "I don't know," I said, "but I hope so. And if love means anything beyond this life, then I believe it does." She smiled, not because she had received an answer, but because she had been met with honesty. After she passed, grief rearranged me. It stripped away impatience, ego, and urgency. The world felt quieter, slower. People asked what I believed now. After all I had seen, I told them belief mattered less to me than how I lived. Loss taught me that compassion is not a theory. It is practice repeated daily, especially when it hurts. At 75, I no longer chase certainty. I don't argue theology. I don't need everyone to agree. I've learned that humility opens more doors than confidence ever did. That listening can be a form of devotion. That kindness does not require a shared doctrine. I still gather with others sometimes, not to prove righteousness, but to remember connection. I read widely, speak carefully, and try to treat doubt as a teacher rather than a threat. When I encounter someone whose beliefs differ from mine, I assume they are carrying a piece of the truth shaped by their own story. To those who feel disillusioned by religion, I understand. To those who find strength within it, I respect that too. My only plea is this: do not abandon the search for meaning. Do not surrender curiosity to bitterness. Ask questions, change your mind. Let yourself be surprised. If there is something sacred at the heart of existence, I suspect it looks less like certainty and more like love expressed through action. Feeding someone, forgiving someone, standing with someone in pain. These moments feel closer to truth than any argument I've ever won. I am nearing the end of my life, and strangely that brings peace. I don't need the mystery solved. I need to live well within it, to leave behind more kindness than harm, more listening than judgment. So wherever you stand, whatever you believe, remember this: your doubts do not disqualify you. Your questions are not failures. They are invitations. Stay curious, stay gentle, help people, love people. That, after 75 years, is the clearest wisdom I have. I offer this not as instruction, but as companionship. Walk your path honestly. Admit fear. Admit wonder. Learn names, share meals, give time. When you fall short, begin again. Meaning grows in ordinary days, in small choices repeated. If there is a divine voice, I hear it in empathy and courage. If there is no divine voice, empathy and courage remain. Either way, choose them, and you will not walk alone. Time teaches gently, asking patience. Practice forgiveness and trust, until understanding arrives quietly at last for everyone eventually.